We as game developers, we always get the one same question. What engine should I use? And there's no real good answer because it's basically a very big it depends. So in today's video, we figured we would answer that question in our favorite style of video, tier lists. We will be taking every engine, or we'll have a bunch of engines at least. We'll be rating them in terms of how user-friendly are they, how expensive are they, how many tutorials are there, things like that, and how deep can you go with them, and just basically the pros and cons of everyone. Then we give them a rank, either S tier till F tier, depending on how good they are. But there's a problem. I'm not a programmer, I'm the creative director, producer, whatever, everything that's not programming guy here. So I brought again my good co-host Thomas, who is actually a programmer and who does know what we're talking about. So he'll be judging as well. I have no idea what his opinion is on any of these genres, so maybe we'll be brawling it out by the end of this video. In this case, I think you should stay tuned to check out that one. So I think we can begin, right?
Yeah, this is like the perfect video to divide and trigger your audience.
There's only one good engine, guys. I won't tell you which one. I think we need to start off with Unity, because of course we're a Unity shop here. Our game Forge Industry is made with Unity, and you have been working with Unity for before, so you must be loving this. But before you get in, let me quickly summarize. Unity is probably one of the big three most well-known engines, and it's simply also one of the oldest ones. Started as Unity 3D like almost 20 years ago. Lots of documentation, lots of tutorials, free to start with, and you only have to pay once you reach a certain amount of income, revenue. You look at me with this devious smile.
Yeah, I think Unity is a very interesting topic to talk about, because over the past few years, I think the entry point to Unity has actually, well, became harder to get started with it. With the packages that Unity is releasing, like the first thing you open Unity, create a new project, you're bombarded with the question, what render pipeline do you want to use? Which is very scary for someone just wanting to make a game for some time.
So, yeah, because I think if you choose the wrong one, is it easy to switch over? If I say that I want to make a URP game, and then I realize that I actually don't need URP.
I mean, there are ways, and I think I read a stat somewhere that even 80% are still of new projects are still started with a legacy pipeline. This is probably an indication that the question is very hard to answer, because you have to basically know what features you want and don't want to use up front, which is very hard.
I think another issue is also tutorial-wise. You now have your tutorial split into two, basically. The one for legacy shading and stuff like that, and the one for URP. And generally tutorials are older. You can watch a tutorial from 5 years ago without knowing that, oh, URP even exists, if those people are still using the legacy pipeline.
Well, we basically start off with ranting about Unity, but we of course are very biased because we use Unity.
Unity for life.
I'm not sure I would say that. But let's also talk about the good things. So first of all, the best thing I think that Unity has to offer for a lot of people that are in the software industry already, like programmers, is that it is in C#. This is by far one of the most accessible languages to get started in game development, so I think that's a very big plus. Another thing is that Unity is very flexible. You can make 2D games, 3D games, VR games, every different platform you ever dreamt of. Like, I think Unity, I don't know if it's still the case, but at some point even had support for Tizen.
Yeah,
I think it's sort of like
watches.
Your watch.
Yeah, I think Unity is very easy to export as well. You just like select, I want WebGL, I want to export to Switch or whatever, and it deals with it.
Now, another downside of Unity is it has a bit of a bad reputation, because a lot of shit games are made with Unity because of their signature made with Unity intro.
Yeah, I think that I once heard that Unity is good enough for bad games. So it's really easy to make something horrible with Unity that is like, shouldn't be released, or is just something that you should keep to your friends to be like, hey, I made this cool little game.
Rating.
If we put it below like B tier, we need to change our engine for our game, I feel.
I was doubting between A and B. Even with all the things I just said, the bad things, it has a lot of good things to offer.
I still think that it should be A, just because it does so much, there is so much documentation, and of course it's gonna be a struggle, but I'm pretty sure that it's because we use Unity the most. We know its flaws the best, so to say. So I think there's a bit of a bias there, but I feel like if we put Unity in a B,
Yeah, the rest is going to suffer.
Yeah, everything else is gonna have to be a D or an E at least. Or
Well,
some,
not everything.
not everything, but some things.
Yeah, okay, I can live definitely in A then,
Okay.
because, well, Unity should never be a bottleneck for your game. This is almost a Bite Me Games guarantee, because even the most visual style of games, okay, maybe not the most, but a lot, very high fidelity games can be made in Unity.
The next one is how I started game programming. Well, programming is already one, and that is
You can program it.
You can program indeed. I did not touch that at all back then though. And that is RPG Maker. So you probably know RPG Maker from those, I don't know, it's like Newgrounds games, or like, you know, the online ones that you could just download a random exe on the internet. It was like made by one guy, usually an RPG with like generic sprites. But I think RPG Maker has gotten a lot of crap basically forever since it was made, but I think it's also really good in certain aspects to do. Oh, you
I
are...
already see a trend. Unity is also getting a lot of crap. RPG Maker is a lot of crap.
I think that
Damn.
no engine is perfect, but I think what RPG Maker is really good at is if you're not a programmer and you want to focus more on writing stories, for example, if you're a writer who wants to focus more on how can I make a good narrative experience without having to care about what render pipeline I'm using. I want to tell a story. I think something like RPG Maker can be really powerful there, to just make your story and share it with the world.
Yeah, I think for artists this is a very good engine. Of course, the limitations being you basically have to make an RPG. Well, it's not entirely true. You can make different genres in it, but at that point, what's even the point to do it in RPG Maker? So I think it's good at what it does, but it's very niche.
Yeah, but I think that it's his strength that they do accept that, hey,
Yeah.
we're RPG Maker. Downside, of course, it's not free, but it's also not too expensive if I remember correctly.
Yeah, if you're ever going to earn money, this is one of the cheapest options, because you don't have licensing and stuff. I think
Yeah,
it's just a one-time
you just buy
fee.
one time. I think it's like 100 euros or something like that, and you can make as many games as you want. Of course, you will never be able to charge $60 for a game made in RPG Maker. You can, but nobody will buy it then, so your income will be less in that regard. And yeah, it has that very distinct, oh, this is an RPG Maker game style. But I think if you can really set down a solid story, this is really good, and it's in the name. It doesn't try to be a shooter or whatever. It's just, we make RPGs and we make them really accessible. I would give it, for what it is, an A or a B tier. Not that I would change Forge Industry to RPG Maker, but I think because they do know what they want and they do focus on that, it should deserve some credit for that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking a B as well. I think it's a step below Unity, because Unity is just more versatile and stuff. And of course, the moment you start a tier list, you're always going to compare it with the different things you just said. But I think it's at least it's a good option for what it is.
Yeah. Now, I said before, Unity is one of the big three engines. It gives us our second of the big three, in my opinion, and that is Godot. I think the big advantage of Godot is that it's fully free, 100%. You pay nothing and you pay never anything. Even if you're very successful, it's fully open source, so you can very easily also, for example, change the editor and really change the engine, something like Unity only has on their enterprise plans, which are ridiculously expensive.
Unity allows you to edit the editor.
Yeah,
you have
but
custom editors, even in Forge Industry.
Yeah, but you don't have the engine itself.
You mean the engine?
I mean the actual engine. Yeah, the editor you can change, but with Godot you can actually change the engine.
Yeah, I guess.
Which is very powerful if you have, I wouldn't recommend it, but just the fact that you can do it if you have some really specific use case is part of that openness and that freeness, and I think that is really good. And Godot has, I feel like there aren't any like massive hits with Godot, but you do have some really good games. For example, like Potato is one that is quite popular that is made in Godot. And I think that's the problem Godot has right now, is there's no like mega hits made with it. There's good games made with it, but there's nothing that has had people like, damn, this was made with Godot.
The moment Godot, a game made with Godot is released and is a big hit, I think indies will flood to it.
Yeah, so I don't think I would call it underrated, so to say, but I do think that there is still a lot of potential with Godot, the engine in general.
As well as Godot, I think a few years ago only was 2D. I think it now also uses 3D. It exports to, I think, almost every platform as well, mobile, console, PC. I think everything is supported.
Language-wise, it does also support C#. It supports both
Yeah,
Go
but I
script.
think mostly they use Godot script.
Yeah, they have Godot script, which is based on Go, which is also a programming language outside of games, but is very much more niche. Where do we put it?
This is such a lame choice, but I think it should also be A.
It should also be A. Man, we're gonna have like all A's.
No, there are definitely some better and worse ones.
Yeah. I think Godot, I mean, honestly, if people ask me what game engine do you recommend, I am like, it depends, but go for Godot or Unity. It's generally my answer, so I do see them as equals in certain regards.
Yeah, I think almost every game engine has a lot of parallels between them, so no matter which one you choose, if you go from Godot to Unity or Unity to Godot, there are some concepts that remain the same. Like, you have different names, okay, but this is not a choice you should make for the rest of your life. It's not like getting married.
The next engine on our list is Game Maker Studio. Also, when I started as a game maker with RPG Studio, I also looked into things like Game Maker Studio. Back then I was just a wee lad and I already found this a bit too complicated. Bear in mind I was very young back then and I never really touched it again for that while. But it is something that is used a lot by beginning game developers. Why? Because they say that start free. Now, it's a little bit of a lie. If you actually want to make a game as an indie and sell it, you need to be able to export it. You can only export the free tier to their own platform, which we don't want. And then it's $10 a month, or between 5 to 10, depending on like what features you need. And what makes it so enticing is that you don't need to program. You can program, but it's all in, a visual drag and drop that is really made for, I'm making my first game.
And I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with Game Maker Studio, but you have like Bolt for Unity, you have Blueprints for Unreal. What makes it so?
I think the difference is that Bolt and Blueprints are more advanced. This is really like, if I push this button, go up like 3 tiles or whatever. So it's really made for very simple games. A bit like if you want if RPG Maker Studio doesn't fit your needs, if you don't want an RPG, you can probably make it in Game Maker Studio as well, very easily. Or like, I press this mouse button and I will fire. There will simply be a block called fire that will automatically interact with a pre-made gun element, things like that.
So it's like a sugar coating of actual code,
Yeah.
while Bolt is
It's
more
a bit like how you have
liners of code.
Yeah, or like how you have Python as the programming language, and then you have Scratch, which is a layer on top of Python that is like very easy to just get people started when they're very young with it. But I'm not the biggest fan of it because
First he's here like hyping it up. Oh, it's very easy to use, things like that.
I don't like their licensing model, and I don't like how, I think this is something that in like 1 month of Game Maker Studio, you should learn enough like to already move on to a next engine. So I think that Game Maker Studio, if you can skip it in your game development process and just go immediately to one of our A-tier engines, whatever they may be at the end of the video, I think that would be better than sitting in here. I would give it a C or a B.
It sounds, the way you explain it to me at least, it sounds like a learning tool more than an actual production-ready game.
That's basically what it comes down to for me.
Though, about the licensing model, I don't think it's necessarily bad. Okay, you have to pay to get started, really, from what I understand.
Yeah,
or at least
whereas
publish.
something like Unity is free to get started with, and only once you've reached success you need to pay.
Yeah, true. $100,000.
Yeah, whereas with Game Maker Studio you have to pay $10 a month even if you have 0 sales.
Actually, now that you mention it, it's for if I see a Game Maker Studio as a learning tool primarily, then it's actually pretty shit. Licensing model. Indeed.
Only the most engaging content here. It's pretty shit. We put it at C then?
I don't know a lot about it, but I would maybe even consider putting it lower.
Maybe, honestly,
It doesn't sound bad per se, but it sounds very niche, because if you get started, you outgrow it in a month, you have to pay for it. It doesn't sound enticing to me.
yeah, indeed. Whereas RPG Maker, they own up to their name. They're really focused on one thing, whereas Game Maker is like, you can make anything with it. It's not gonna be great.
I think it's only 2D though.
I think you can like force it for some 3D stuff, but it's like with their pre-made assets and things like that.
I would put it in D from what I hear.
We'll put it in D tier then.
Also, it's a lot more controversial if you have bad things. So people write in the comments, Game Maker Studio is the best thing ever.
If you make good games with Game Maker Studio, I want to see those because I don't believe it.
Comment down below with links to your Steam page or whatever, and we'll just dislike your comment.
YouTube will flag them. Next up is Unreal Engine, the last one of our big three, so to say. I have never worked with this, so you probably know more about it than me. What I know about Unreal is that it's more for, whereas Unity is great for 2D games, for example, and like lower poly ones, a lot of the very high, that's what I feel like Unreal is like, photorealism. Also, if you look at stuff like how they actually integrate with like cinema, so for example, Mandalorian, all of those scenes are filmed with Unreal Engine. But I don't know how, have you ever touched it? Do you know how the concepts work?
I've touched it a bit. I know a bit about the concepts as well. Honestly, this is very against my own shop. I think Unreal is better than Unity in a lot of key different ways. Before you...
No problem.
Before you lash out at me, let me explain why. First of all, pure high fidelity wise, Nanite and Lumen, their new systems, are super impressive. Like a couple of weeks ago, they showed the Rivian demo. Yeah. It is very impressive. Technical speaking with procedural generation of levels.
Yeah, I think
it's insane.
If you want bleeding edge like stuff, also like Houdini, for example, for procedural generation, I don't think there are really anything that can match that fidelity and that performance in Unity in an easy way without really heavily having to edit the engine.
Yeah, out of the box, Unreal gives you way higher fidelity visuals because they do a lot of things for you already. But I also think for even lower poly games, they are not bad at all. Like, I think they are actually underrated for indie games. Yeah. Because first of all, I just think their pricing model is just plain better than Unity.
It's a percentage based instead of the seats, right?
Yeah, but also I think it's the first million is, you just use it as you want, and before you're at a million as an indie dev, it's free, completely free.
And if you then put it on Epic Game Store instead of Steam, it's always free as well, because it's the integration between Epic Games, who make Unreal Engine, and their own store.
Yeah, on top of that, even for beginners, okay, the coding language, I think it's C++?
C++, yeah.
Is, okay, that's more challenging than C#, generally speaking, because it's a lower level language than C#.
But that also allows you to get those crazy good performance numbers for that fidelity and things like that.
Exactly. But even though Unity has bold, blueprints in Unreal basically negates the lower level language that you have.
And yeah, I think even, don't quote me on this, but I think Bolt basically just came around after Unreal showed how good the visual interface is as well.
Yeah, basically Bolt was an asset paid at the asset store, and Unity thought like, damn, they made something cool, let's buy this asset, and now it's Unity's property. Which is, I mean, I guess not bad, but I think this should be S tier actually.
I would agree with you indeed. Yeah, I think this is S tier. It's just we don't use it because it didn't fully fit our use case and we didn't have the experience with it as much. But I think if you are a beginning indie developer and you're asking yourself the question, what should I begin with from the three big engines? I think that Unreal, especially if you are looking into maybe if you have some more experienced modelers in your team that can make some high poly models, I think it can really be worth it to go for Unreal as well.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be your go-to choice. I think you should really pick between, spoilers, Unreal, Godot and Unity, but think about it very carefully. Also think about the future, because we mainly chose Unity because I had a lot of experience with it already, and that's literally it.
I think in the end, if you really want, you can just like blind pick an engine and like you'll probably be able to make a game out of it. But I think Unreal can really offer extra value. Also, one more thing I think about, Unreal gives you grants for making games. So I don't know the full, but basically if you make a game with Unreal Engine, you can pitch it and they will give you between 25,000 and like between 5,000 and I think 50,000 US dollars or even more, just for making it in Unreal if they select you. So it's basically free funding. Our next engine is one that I put in because I don't have any experience with it, but I see it online often mentioned as, oh, this is one of those very easy engines to get started in without code, and that is Construct 3. Honestly, I haven't worked that much with it, and first glance, I don't really like it that much because it costs 18 euros a month. There is a free version, but you can barely do anything in the free version. You can't do debugging. You have the custom loading screens, of course, such as Unity as well, that you can't do. You're limited in a lot of...
Unity allows you to do custom loading screens?
Oh, I mean the made with
Splash
Unity.
Screens.
Splash screens, sorry.
Okay,
yeah.
because I think in Construct, it's actually really loading screens, right? that they mentioned.
Like
Because-
loading a level.
Yeah.
Yeah, because construct.
That's something Unity did like 10 years ago, and it's probably the best thing that they stopped doing is limit access to certain features.
Yeah, I don't like it when you have this engine that is half an engine. So maybe let me quickly touch back on what is Construct exactly. They focus mainly on very simple no-code mobile and web games. So you don't have to program, and if you do have to, or if you do want to program, hold on your horse. It's JavaScript, which is not like a language I would use for making games in. So that's already that I'm like, but it really showed it's made for like Flash, well, not Flash games, but like HTML5 web games.
I haven't worked with it. From what you just described it, if I had to pick it myself,
I would never recommend it.
I would go with F tier. I haven't worked with it. I might have triggered some of you guys.
Well,
but
I think it is worse than Game Maker because it costs twice as much as Game Maker Studio as well.
But it also sounds more shit.
I don't know about that.
You limit yourself. You have to program in JavaScript. You don't have typing.
Yeah, and you have to pay if you wanna. So their pitch is web games, Android and iOS. Android and iOS you have to pay for, so you can only make web games with the free one.
F tier.
Okay, I do agree as well. I don't recommend this. Just go for, first of all, if anything ever tells you to learn JavaScript, you run away. That's
Well, JavaScript itself isn't so bad if you use TypeScript, which is a superset. JavaScript in itself, I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, let's stay away from this one, and let's stay away from the next one as well, which is your own engine. I think it's I think it's a bad idea. That's what I've been saying basically throughout all of the videos we've made the past year as well. Making your own engine, so what does that mean? You actually low-level program in C or C++, you program OpenGL, physics, basically everything you make from scratch. There's no editor. Your editor is just your code, and you just compile it all in C++. And I do understand the appeal. One, it's free, whatever, but that's not really the reason you built your own engine. You have ultimate control over your game. And this means that if you have something that you're like, this is a really cool mechanic, but all of the other engines don't allow me to do it, screw it, I'll do it myself.
My tiny brain can't even think of a mechanic that the big three can't do. So I think this is a terrible option.
But I think that's where you're right. The thing is, we know what the engines do, but if you're like ideating your first game and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have these really cool mechanics, and you can't find a Unity tutorial or whatever on YouTube, you're like, it must be impossible.
But what's the chance? You don't realize something can be done in an engine, but you do know how to make your own engine.
I think it's also, with own engine, you have to keep in mind, it's also part of the fun, so to say.
That's true.
You do learn a lot about computers, programming, memory management, and things like that from making your own engine. I think it's just horrible if you want to commercialize a game.
Yeah, I think this is a great learning tool. I think it's also a big challenge, so if you're into that, you can do it.
Yeah, I think.
But for a commercial game, I wouldn't.
I think if you're more like, I'm a programmer and I really want to get a job in the games industry as a programmer, having something like, I've written my own engine, I control memory registers with my bare hands, can really give you a plus in knowing how everything works. I would put it at like an D or an E.
I would put it.
I wouldn't put it at F because...
No, I wouldn't put it at F either because I just heard about JavaScript. But I would put it in E because from what I've heard, Game Maker Studio has some drawbacks, sure, about the pricing and stuff, but it also has some key advantages. It's a very big task. You have a lot of time that you will lose creating your own engine.
Yeah. Just being able to display like a blank screen will already take a very long time.
You're reinventing the wheel. So I would put it in E.
Our next engine isn't really an engine. This one I kind of threw in because
Bamboozle.
when you go to me and you say, I want to make games, I think that you can actually learn a lot about making fun video games and making engaging games by making board games. And what you need for that as your engine is basically a pen and paper, and if you can draw, whatever. But this allows you to really quickly ideate how do mechanics work, because we've actually played around internally with like some games as well, like a board game. And there we can be like, oh, this isn't working. Instead of me having to reprogram actual lines of code, I just tell them, hey, from now on, this card does this thing. And that's basically the reprogramming. And this really allows you to very quickly find out what is fun in a game, basically. And I think that, okay, commercially, it's not the best, but I think if you want to learn how to make a game, it's a lot easier. If you want to make it a success commercially, you'll need to have a publisher, different to a video game publisher, but you have to print physical goods, which is always a hassle. You have to ship them. And you have people on Kickstarter and such that are successful in doing it, but it's a lot more stress, of course, than making a video game.
I mainly look at this from a learning tool, because like you said, it's very easy to iterate through ideas. And if I look at what we already put together, the bottom 3, the highest rated one, I also evaluated as a learning tool. And I think board games are better.
I think this is a B. I'll just say it.
I was doubting between B and C, mainly because it's good to learn, it's good to get ideas, mechanics.
It's also really fun because you play it. It's always a multiplayer game, so you need friends. I'm sorry if you don't have friends, but ideally you'll need to have friends.
Yeah. The biggest downside is it's not commercial. At least
it is,
easily.
But it's very hard compared to making a game. So they all have their challenges.
Yeah. That's the main reason I think more a C actually, because at least with Game Maker you can easily distribute it.
We'll do like our last tier list. It's not a full B, it's a B- or a C+, something like that. But I think in general it's a really good exercise, even if you're already a game dev. Try to make a board game in like a weekend or something. Try to come up with a cool mechanic and turn it into a board game. And maybe you even find some inspiration for a new game through it that you can translate from the board to the computer.
Is this foreshadowing until a few months until you learn about our next game? Who knows?
Who knows? Stay tuned, subscribe down below. This next engine I found, and I didn't even know it was free, but it has a similar model to Unity and Unreal, and that is CryEngine. So known for games such as Crysis and Star Citizen are both made in CryEngine. And they apparently released their engine to indie developers. And it's free to use until your first $5,000 of revenue.
5,000.
5,000, yeah,
okay.
Not that much. After which you have to pay 5% royalties. And let me begin, I was looking, there are no tutorials for this. Like there's one playlist from Cry itself. But I think that CryEngine doesn't really focus on indie developers. I think CryEngine looks at those AA games or such that are like, they don't have the full budget of a fully custom in-house engine such as Frostbite, for example, that EA uses, but they do need something that is very expandable. And I think what CryEngine is doing is more releasing it for free so that they can train developers to use it to then go to those AA studios and make those games. And CryEngine is very powerful. I think CryEngine is even more graphically beautiful than Unreal in a lot of cases, but it's hella hard. That's all I can say about it really, especially because there's also no documentation for it.
Do you know when they made it free?
I have no idea.
Okay. Because if you're an indie game developer, I don't think this is looking sexy at all to you, mainly because you basically need documentation. Unreal has great documentation, Unity has acceptable documentation, but a buttload of tutorials on YouTube. Godot has, I don't know about the documentation, but at least there are quite a bit of tutorials
again.
I don't think this is a very common choice, which in my opinion is a very big risk if you have, because you basically don't have any guidelines. Would I think it's as bad as JavaScript? No.
It's also better than making your own engine, I feel.
Yeah, but I also think it's worse than Game Maker Studio.
So,
because at least with Game Maker Studio, you
make something
you get
on
some,
your own.
yeah, you get some like breadcrumbs, and you can find your way through the forest. But from what I hear here is like, yeah, you're basically starving. You don't get breadcrumbs.
So an E+ or a D- is what you would say.
I mean, yes.
I was thinking about a D as well. So,
but put it below Game Maker Studio. Also, $5,000.
Yeah,
that's a pretty shit amount.
Yeah.
Do you have to pay like a percentage?
Yeah, 5%.
Okay. That's also a lot. Like if you sell somewhat well, Unity is a fixed price after 100,000 or 200,000 depending on your license. And Unreal,
I think
Unreal is like one of the best deals in game engines right now.
Yeah. So this final one, I didn't work with myself, but one of the other developers on our team, William, actually told me to put this on the list, which is Phaser.
Never heard of it.
Perfect. I'll give you some quick details. It's made for HTML5 games, so purely web games really, and it's fully free as well. It's open source, and you're gonna like this, it supports JavaScript.
Great.
And TypeScript, so at least
Better.
you have a bit more of a real programming language there. And you can tell its focus is not really on making in-depth games, but you know, once again, it's for like flash games. Or one thing that they also advertise themselves is, you know, those promotional games where you have to like catch the chicken wings in the bucket to win a free like discount meal voucher or whatever. Things like that is also something that they really try to get into the advert game space. And I think as an indie developer, this is maybe something that if you're like, oh, I'm already bored of Unity, I've made like so many games, I want to just try something new, I want to enter a game jam, I want to try a new engine and just like handicap myself a bit, or not handicap, but challenge myself. I think that Phaser is a really good one. I couldn't find anything like inherently bad with the engine. That's the thing.
Is it, you said it's free, is it also open source?
It's open source as well, yeah. So it's on GitHub. You can fork the engine entirely as well, because in the end it's HTML5. They have a web editor, or you can have a local editor as well. So it's I think in that regard it's quite good, but I'm pretty sure that unless you are an ad agency making those advertisement games, I don't think you'll ever make money with one of these games unless you like put in a bunch of ads and get it like, I don't know, on like some 8-year-old kid's iPad. So I would put it, because I don't know, do you have anything to add?
I'm just thinking where I would put it from what I just heard.
I would put it a C. It's not great, but the pitch is pretty good that they have.
The thing is, I want to put it at a D, because I think it's still worse than Game Maker Studio, but better than Frostbite, but now I regret putting Game Maker Studio
You want to
D.
put Game Maker Studio maybe like D+?
No, maybe in C, and then Phaser above Frostbite. And
CryEngine, yeah.
Well, CryEngine above Frostbite, and then Phaser above. Yeah. But from this mess that you're seeing on your screen right now,
only the finest.
Yeah, Game Maker Studio should be higher.
Yeah.
I think we underestimated it a bit there.
I think we have a new wrap-up, but honestly, everything, a lot of these topics were also just for fun. Honestly, if you're making a new game, Unreal, Godot, Unity, go to the timestamps if you forgot why they're great. All of them are great, and in general, I think you can't miss with those.
Yeah, even if you pick something that we labeled as F or E tier or whatever, you can still make a great game with it. This is an opinion. This is also...
This is just us fooling around in the end.
Yeah, because we also don't have a lot of experience with all of these engines, so it's hard to judge them fairly. So it's just first opinions mostly. I think no matter which one you choose, if you are a good developer, you can make any one of these work. And if you are going to start on your indie journey, you want to be sure to subscribe to our channel, as we make this kind of cool content twice a week, where we talk about game dev tips and tricks, or simply more fun content as this, or you can actually follow along the progress of our own games as well. We're currently working on a resource management and automation game, Forge Industry. You can wishlist that one down below, and there will be an upcoming Steam Next Fest demo as well that you'll be able to play for free. For free, indeed. So in general, if you want to learn more about game development, simply subscribe. It's a win-win for both of us. You get this cool content, and we get your subscription and your watch time. That's all I have for this video. We'll be back in the next one. And until then, I would say good luck developing with whatever engine you choose. Maybe let us know, what engine are you using? Have you got any struggles with a certain engine? Do you hardly disagree with some of our picks? Do you think that your own engine is S tier? I'm really curious to hear about that one. So let us know still, and then we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.